We shall tap into...
From Major Papi, you mentioned him, so he's actually sent me this message in response to what you said. Paul, so yes, that's the Franklin Kujo's write-up on social, on Facebook as well. I mean, he has sent me, one. All right, Paul.
Well, Franklin Kujo may have a point in some of the things he addresses in terms of application of state resources during the period of the MPP. He may have a point. But the picture he paints prior to the Russia-Ukraine war and the picture he paints right now prior to the Israeli war is different. And it will obviously be different because there was COVID immediately preceding Russia-Ukraine war. So if you are coming out of COVID, you are coming from a terrible situation, and that was the state of affairs everywhere in the world. Everybody's inflation was up. Those who have never seen inflation at 5%, they saw it. Those who have never seen inflation in double digits, they saw it. Those of us who struggle with inflation double single digits, we shot up into the roof. That was the post-COVID effect of economies. Whilst very small economies like Ghana are thinking about that, and then come Russia-Ukraine war. So the economic fundamentals preceding the Russia-Ukraine war was itself completely wobbling, and that was the state of affairs everywhere. So I'm not sure what the point they are making. Then the point about this, that has changed. Now, since the Russia-Ukraine war, and since Ghana fell into that situation, there was an improvement of that situation coming out of the IMF program in 2023. That improvement was intended to continue. You may well say that the NDC have been better managers of the economy. Fair enough. The jury is still out on that matter. But then you come to the point about the Russia-Ukraine war is still on. The Russia-Ukraine war is still... Has it diminished? Because what the Russia-Ukraine war did, which is why it was easy for political spin doctors to say that whatever problem you are facing is not Russia-Ukraine war. It was easy for you to spin that was because the world was unaware of the extensive supply chain connection between Europe and the rest of the world that was controlled by Ukraine. The world was not aware of that. Egypt did not have grain for weeks and months because of the Russia-Ukraine war. This is a war that came to disrupt supply chain. It's not a war about fuel or the things that we can obviously relate to. So if you're a government and you say that your supply chain has been disrupted and therefore prices of commodities which pass through that supply chain will escalate, it's not very simple to explain that to many people, especially when you have a charged political atmosphere where your opponents are spinning the other way. So that is the point of the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, once it started, it is a supply chain disruption. The world, sophisticated as we have become, will always find an alternative to a supply chain disruption. You heard that when they said the Strait of Hormuz had been blocked, there are ways to... America is already thinking of how to avoid that and circumvent all of these things. This is how the world has become. So the effects of the Russia-Ukraine war have been circumvented. The supply chain has been replaced. So to say that the Russia-Ukraine war is still raging, I think that is the worst of the arguments that anybody can make. The Russia-Ukraine war is still raging. How can anybody say that? It's a supply chain disruption. That supply chain has been replaced. The Russia-Ukraine war can go on forever, and it will never have the effect of the time it started. I don't understand how anybody can spin political propaganda and say that Russia-Ukraine war is still on. Really? What's the point you are making? So if you come back to the management of the economic situation, we used to be net importers of petroleum. Now we are both net importers and net exporters. That obviously is a better situation. Until and unless we have the control in our country.
You're talking about the Middle East crisis, the current
one, not Russia-Ukraine war. Yes, I'm moving to the Middle East crisis.
Okay.
So I'm setting out our petroleum agenda.
Okay.
That we used to be net importers. Now we are net exporters as well. That's a better situation than being net importers only. Until and unless we are able to develop the supply chain and have control over the products that we own and set up a petroleum system, a petroleum regime that has our own control over it, we are always going to be susceptible to global fluctuations. So if you look at over the years, and that's why I started by saying we are net importers, we are net exporters. Now, it was worse before. If you look at since the beginning of the early 2000s, maybe in the 1999, the thinking about Ghana's sustainability in petroleum had begun. And so institutions like BOST, which were not existent, were created, the bulk oil storage. This is all in getting Ghana to own a significant part of the petroleum regime so that we can control the prices for longer periods. That process had started. That was under the NDC. Then President Kufuor came and the NDC, I think they created Tamale Refinery. No, Tamale Refinery was always there, but they gave it some special attention. And then there was, you remember there was something called toll debts.
Right.
Okay. And then there's a Ghana Commercial Bank stuff. I'm talking about the beginning of the process that started about 25 years ago to create Ghana's energy sustainability and energy control. So all of these institutions were developed up until NPA, National Petroleum Authority, Petroleum Commission. All of these people are, so once Ghana began to find oil, all of these institutions have been created to try and increase Ghana's control over petroleum fluctuations. So the control that Ghana has over petroleum fluctuations in 2024 is greater than the control that Ghana had 10 years earlier,
right,
whichever government was in place. So in these circumstances, Ghana has better control over petroleum fluctuations because we are here in 5 weeks, 6 weeks. We didn't used to have that. We used to be days and months, and did I say months? Days and 2 weeks, and it's gone. When the President Kufuor administration took over in January 2001, panic immediately hit the government because they were told that they have only 2.5 weeks of import cover. So if we have moved from 2.5 weeks in 2001 to 5 weeks in 2026, that's a significant improvement. But let's not anyone say that somebody is a better manager of Ghana's petroleum situation than the other, because we are not yet at the place where we have even 60% control. So whoever is managing it, if the crisis is deep, it will affect you. The reason why Ghana has survived this crisis up until now, and we may survive it even longer, is because of the systems that have been developed over time to increase Ghana's control over the petroleum situation. Started 25 years ago. So we are where we are now because of that work that had been done. I'm sure by the next 10 years from now, a lot more would have been done. So we are where we are as a combination of a state effort. It's not because NDC is a better management of something. Now, where we are is still not where we want to be. So if the crisis hit to a certain level, whether NDC like it, whether they are good managers of the economy, whether they have the best finance minister, the crisis will hit because you are not sustainable. If politicians want to spin this one and use it for election, that is the evil that has brought us to where we are. When politicians know that this is not something to spin, but you want to win election, so you will spin it as being against the government, when you know that the system and the economy that we run, it is unable to resolve certain shocks, you know. But then when the shocks come and you are excited about it in opposition because you believe that it will make the government unpopular, and every economic shock makes every government unpopular. Over the last few days, Americans have been complaining about the sharp rise in petroleum. They are complaining in Europe. So for us citizens, we are electing you to come and sort us out. If there's anything, we complain about it. If I'm opposition and the system allows me to exploit the complaints of the people against the government, even when I am aware that this is really not the government's fault. If you swap the government on Monday, I will be in the same situation. If you swap the government that bring John Mahama to be president in 2021, you will have the same situation. Once we agree on that, then we can now compete on ideas that are original. But if we exploit things that we shouldn't exploit, then we have created a chain that will now be exploited all over. So hope that this crisis doesn't get there. But if the crisis gets to small places where we have to increase petrol by marginal conversations, it will now start. Why are you increasing the petrol? Didn't you say your fundamentals were good? You say that everything is good. You say that you have your dollar, you have your CD. If the CD goes to 12, it will start. You say your fundamentals are good, so why are you complaining? Because a system has been put in place where politicians are exploiting some of these things. That's the problem. That's the problem we have.
Okay. Doc.
Yeah. You see, I can understand where my brother is coming from. There is some form of... you cannot tell me that a government uses 126 ministers at a time, and one comes and is using 58, 60. That is not management, and that is a fluke or is by accident. No, it's by leadership. In a situation where you find a whole number of MPs calling on the resignation of the finance minister from their own fold, it couldn't have been good management. That is a mark of poor management. Choosing to build a cathedral in a period that you were hemorrhaging. That is not good management. A particular government comes, deciding that, look, I want to have 60 at most, now using 58. He decides to say that, well, you cannot be using DSTV and the state to be paying. You cannot be drawing fuel, right? These are cost-cutting measures that is born out of a kind of leadership. Yes, you may all be exposed to, right, a certain fundamentals. But that is why I'm saying that it will be the miracle of the century, right? If the effect that will come because of this, right, is minimal. And Mr. Franklin Kujo suggests to the effect that maybe even if it is a year, we may not experience that. I am not an expert in that field. But these intangibles, right, that the leadership of the president has put in place cannot be ignored. They cannot, right? So if I look at some of these steps, I believe that it will boil down to leadership. It will boil down to some shrewd management. The effect, yes, if it goes on, it gets protracted to a certain level, we are going to have that kind of effect. You cannot in any way, run away from that. I just also wanted to check, for example, Mr. Adom suggests that, well, the Russian listing is there, but it is now a lame argument because they have found different routes. Of course, we made a mountain out of a molehill with respect to using that as an excuse. Maybe at that time, they did not know how to circumvent that, and so with time it has been. But you still cannot in any way ignore the fact that the war is still raging. And you can also not ignore the fact that the effect ought to be there. It may be minimal, but it will still be there. But it is because somebody else is taking a different decision, a different direction altogether in terms of management. So as a way of putting all the two together and think that, well, when the fundamentals are weak, it will affect you anyway. It doesn't matter the shrewdness of the finance minister or whoever, right, that is handling the affairs of the economy of the country. I think that it has. Okay. Probably the former president did not listen a lot more to the people that matter with respect to his government. Because, as I said, people who are following you might have seen something in your finance minister to suggest to you that, look, change him. How long did it take for him to change him? To decide that resuscitating the banks, that will cost the nation around 9 billion. You decided to go on the part of what? Collapsing. And at the end of the day, the state had to spend over 25 billion. That is not good management. So we cannot put them on the same, scale and condemn them together, thinking that, well, the crisis have come anyway. Whichever way you look at it is going to affect you. Yes, it is going to affect us. The extent that people have said, and that is why I said that the verdict, yes, I agree, that over the period, we have been using certain things for political gain, which after some years, we are beginning to do away with that. Petro, and the first person that I will mention, his name is Mr. Kokubako, right? After President Kufuor took over, what did we see? He said, no. He's realized that being in opposition and find yourself in government are two different things. We need to bite the bullet. That is, he brought the expression. And Mr. Kokubako also insisted, along some of the argument to enjoy that, look, it appears that going forward, Petro is something that we must not do politics with it. So that narrative also shaped the argument along the line. Until at that time, we had not even gotten fuel, in commercial quantity and so on and so forth. So we have come a long way. But we cannot do away with the fact that you have a new president, we had an old president, that probably never listened to good counsel and rather listened to his finance minister. And so, and of course, people say that Vice President Bawumia was not made to operate freely. Probably all these things could be part of the argument that led to a situation where the government